Hi, I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities via a number of different modalities. This podcast is obviously one of them. We also have a Facebook group of like-minded people committed to spiritual growth and transformation, and you can find us at liveauthentically.today/FB. I'm super pumped that I just launched my debut book recently, SOAR, SOAR. It's on Amazon, and it's a spiritual journey. And I share a very personal journey through my divorce process and show how I partnered with the universe to create my new reality. So I believe that anyone, regardless of their situation, can totally transform their life. And that book shares some of my knowledge and wisdom. So I am super pumped that on my show with me today, I have Nick Demas. Hey, Nick.
Hey, Pam. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm super pumped. So we're going to launch into our show, and I have a few prepared questions here. But before we do that, why don't we kick it off actually with my signature question that I kick every show off with? And that is, are you ready? Well, that's not the actual question, but you're like, yeah. Well,
I was like, woo, that's simple. I'm good to go. Easiest interview ever.
Thanks for joining me, Nick. You're like, that was profound. Okay, here we go. How do you live authentically every day?
How do I live authentically every day? How do I not? How do I not? I think that is the universal search for truth.
Love that.
We come into this world, our authentic self. And then we are told, be this way, be that way, be this way. Don't be that way, be this way. I'm putting my hand in front of my face for those of you that can't see, because it's these blockages that are put in front of us. We are told who we are not. And it becomes this process every single day. For me, anyway, it's a practice of reminding myself who I actually am, so that I step out into the world fully me. Not what other people think I am, not what I've been told I am, but what I am from divine source. And that practice, it is a practice. I step onto the yoga mat every single morning. I roll out my mat. I practice some asana. I practice pranayama, which is a breathing, old-fashioned, old-school breath work, over 2,000-year-old lineage. I meditate. I write a bit. And the reason I do that is because I'm putting myself into a vibrational state so that when I step off the mat, I am in that state of being, because authenticity is a state of beingness. And the trouble comes in. Now that's all really good, right? Like, okay, I'm feeling it. I'm in my space. I'm practicing. I'm in the state of being. And then you walk into the world and you're confronted by others. Yeah. It's really easy to sit in meditation. Now it's not easy to sit in meditation, but it's easier to find that state of being when you're solo than when you're actually interacting with others. And we co-create and we collaborate in this world. And so finding that state is reactionary. Oftentimes I think of my authenticity or my look at truth as my reaction to the world. Life is not, as they say, what happens to you. It's how you react to it. So staying in that state of being, staying in an authentic place, staying in my truth requires me to form a non-reactive way of being.
And so what does that look like? Let's say you're all zenned out, you're on the yoga mat, you're like, yeah, life's good, high vibes, whatever. And then you step on the yoga mat and you're bombarded with negativity. So can you walk me through that? I kind of like to dive bomb your psyche here for just a minute. I want to understand like what goes on in your mind and how do you maintain that high vibrational state? Like, what does that look like? Can you walk me through an example?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So I live currently in a city, and a city that's very overwhelming with noise, with people, with stuff. And I'm in the that state of being that we were talking about. I've set myself up for the great day. I walk out into the street and boom, a car horn hits me. Boom, somebody on the street annoys me. Right away, I'm bombarded by all of this energy. So what do? I take a deep breath. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing I do. Rather than reacting, rather than flipping somebody off, rather than sending out the negativity that I could be responsive to, I take a deep breath. I think that is really key for me, is breath. Mm-hmm. Because we are gifted with 21,600 breaths per day on average, each person on average. What a natural form of abundance, right? 21,600 breaths every single day. Yeah. And if I can lean into that, if I can say, what happens is it stops my brain from going to that negative place and space, right? So automatically, by taking that breath, I take myself out of fight or flight from the sympathetic into the parasympathetic nervous system, right? Yeah. And I'm reminded of my wholeness. I'm reminded of my oneness with all things, including the car horn, including the person that annoyed me, including whatever is coming at me. So if I can do that in that moment, it brings awareness to it and it shifts the energy and it draws me back to that practice on the mat. Because that's exactly what we call it, a practice on the mat. It's not what happens on the mat. It's not what happens when you sit in meditation. It's what happens when you walk out into the world. Mm-hmm. And so I carry it basically as best I possibly can in every moment to moment, because it is moment to moment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If only it were so simple as, okay, I took the big breath. Now I'm ready to go for the rest of my day.
Right.
Because 2 steps down, I may trip on some garbage that's on the street that was left there, that it's really annoying to me, right? I may trip on that and I have to start all over again. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I do. Now, do I always succeed? No. Some days I flip somebody off, right? Some days I just can't control that, whatever that is, that trigger, that moment, whatever it is that is drawing to me. So I look at it. So I lean into it and say, there's my work.
Yeah.
Or play, I like to say. There's my play. I get to examine that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's so incredibly powerful. And I'd like to dive in there a little bit deeper. I love how, first of all, you use the phrase moment to moment. I use that phrase as well. It's really, this journey is really a moment to moment practice of training the mind. Mm-hmm. Right? And realizing that we have a choice. Right? We can either choose to be pulled down into negativity and stress and anxiety and worry and blame and shame and drama and all that stuff, which doesn't serve us and keeps us in contraction mode, or we can choose to move out of it, right? And that was one of the most empowering shifts on my journey, is when I realized that I have autonomy and I have the license to choose my emotions, to choose my state of being. And just because somebody else is beeping their horn at you or flicking you off or whatever, it doesn't mean you need to meet, and it doesn't mean you need to, nor does it mean that, you should meet them in that lower vibrational place. Like, you stay where you are, right? Stay in your high vibe, stay in that high place, that high state of being, and give them the opportunity to meet you where you are. And it's very empowering when we realize that we own our emotions and we get to choose on a moment to moment basis how we want to feel, and how we feel is how we attract, right? And that's what creates our entire reality.
Absolutely. And that is also why I practice breath work, why I practice pranayama, because what it's doing is by doing it every single morning, I'm actually training my mind, I'm training my body to do the automatic response in a new and a different way. Rather than go to the automatic response of fight or flight of the old reptilian brain, with the practices of breath, I'm teaching myself to actually take that breath. So it transfers off of the mat onto the street and keeps me in that space.
Yeah, so beautiful. Love that. So there's so many different directions I want to go here. I'm trying to decide like, okay, which way do we want to go? What I'm going to do next, I told you before the show, before we started recording, I brought a little show and tell item, which I'm guarantee you're going to like.
Okay.
So anyways, I was cleaning out some stuff recently, like, stuff that just accumulates over time. And, I've got drawers full of like, whatever, just random stuff that I've accumulated. And so I have in one of my drawers upstairs, I had a bunch of just random like pamphlets and just like ticket stubs and stuff from, events that I've gone to around here when I travel, et cetera. And so I cleaned out a lot of it. I cleaned out most of it actually. But one of the items that I decided to save, and I didn't really know why, like sometimes I don't even know why I do what I do, right? It's just intuition, divine guidance, whatever. So I was like putting stuff in piles. This is going to go, I'm going to save this. And this is one of the items I saved.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. That's amazing.
And just so for those of you who are watching and listening, Nick is an award-winning producer, filmmaker, soul-aligned business coach, and you had a very prominent role in Come From Away. So I would love to hear you talk about this. This was such a profound soul enriching experience. And I would love to hear you talk about your experience and how you believe that this musical helps humanity move forward in a meaningful way.
Yeah, so Come From Away, for anybody who doesn't know, is a musical that is the story of on 9/11, planes were diverted to a little town in Newfoundland, Canada, called Gander. And over the course of the week, when they shut down the airspace to when it reopened, the town of Gander took care of all of these people. They literally brought them into their homes because this is a teeny little town. It's not like it had a ton of hotels. They literally took people into their homes, took care of them, and this is the story of that time. And what is so beautiful about it is that it's a world story, and that there were people from all over the world brought together during that time. And if you remember that period right after 9/11, for those of you that are too young, it may be even hard to fathom this, but for those of us that are old enough to remember, there was this period right after 9/11 happened where people connected, where we were kind, where we looked each other in the eye, because we knew that something significant had shifted in the world in that moment. And the story of Come From Away really tells not only the story of the people and their experience during that time together, but our collective oneness. That's really what the story is ultimately about. And the reason that I got involved with it was I had produced another musical and on Broadway that was successful, and my co-producers on that found Come From Away, and they brought this project to me and said, hey, I think you want to be involved in this, and they were right. It really speaks to me as an artist, me as a producer, and more importantly, me as a human being, and the stories that I want to reflect, the way in which I want to help the world see things. And I think that's really what art does, right? Is that it helps you have perspective on yourself and on our collective humanity.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that was just such a profound experience. And really it's such profound messages and lessons. And like you said, that just really highlighted the connection and just showed how people just came together. So thank you for sharing that. So the next question I have for you is, I know you do, like I said, a lot of different things: producer, filmmaker, soul-aligned business coach. You have your own podcast. You have tons of experience with teaching meditation, yoga, creative practices, etc. What do you believe your purpose here on earth is?
My purpose is to be me, to live authentically. Speaking of authentic, I believe that my purpose is not necessarily what I do, it's how I am in everything that I do. And so consequently, it has shifted form over the years. My what I have done in the world has shifted form. When I first started my career, I was a dancer, professional dancer. Danced at Radio City with the Rockettes, and my backup dance for Aretha Franklin. And I had a full dance career. And then that shifted into directing and choreography, and then producing. And then after the producing career, while I still produce, obviously come from away, I shifted my focus to helping others. And moved not that producing Broadway shows isn't helping others, because it is, as we just had this full conversation about it. But I knew that I wanted to make impact with the individual. And so I began to work and coach people through their transformative practices, through yoga, meditation, because I also had taught yoga for 20 years. It was always my sort of side hustle, my side job. And I wanted to sort of bring all of my worlds together. And that's really where I'm at now, where it's this sort of cohesive way of my being in the world, again, that word being, my being in the world that brings all of my gifts, all of my talents, all of my uniqueness that is really just a fraction of the whole. So my light forward, so that I can turn back and show and put a spotlight out, so that somebody else can walk behind and join me.
Beautiful. And it's just so enriching and just so fulfilling to be in a role where we're awakening others, helping them on their journey, et cetera. And it comes with many, many benefits from a soul perspective. But do you find that there are challenges for you in any aspect of what you do?
Oh, wow. There are challenges in every aspect.
Give me an example of what is the most challenging thing that you struggle with on a regular basis?
I think it's interesting. The struggles have shifted. When I first started, the struggle was about, how do I make a living? Okay. How do I do this? How do I allow for abundance and the energy exchange? How do I allow for that to happen? I tended to be I do believe this had to do with some childhood trauma. I tended to be an overgiver, right? I gave everything away for free. And I had to learn that the energy exchange, and this is a challenge that I still deal with, that the energy exchange, and it's actually better for my clients. It actually empowers them more when I ask them to step up and ask them to pay to give, because I was giving it all away. And I realized when I was giving away all of my sage advice, all of my years of all my years of knowledge and wisdom, when I was giving it away, they didn't really value it. And I had to learn that lesson. And it's one that I continue to learn. And I had to learn that I had to actually ask them to commit, to step up, and the way in which we do that energy exchange is through finances, through money. And that was a big challenge, and still is to me at a certain level. I think, speaking of living authentically and in your truth, I think there were years of conditioning for me of two things. The artist narrative of the starving artist, that if you're going to be a real artist, you're poor. Then there was the narrative of, if you are a true spiritual being in this world, you give away the knowledge and the teachings for free. So that combined together, and the trauma that I had in childhood, all brought together, drew a big challenge for me in my life of worth. And what I've had to learn, and the challenge that I'm overcoming, because I can't even say I'm fully there yet. Obviously, when you hear me go, right? The challenge that I'm overcoming is learning that my worth is not dependent on any of that. Right.
And then your worth comes from within. I mean, that's something that's true for all of us. It comes from within. Value comes from within, right? We create it within us by doing the work. And the world responds to the way that we feel about ourselves, how we value ourselves.
Correct.
Based on, the vibes that we put out.
Correct. And that is a challenge that I look at daily, daily, to be very honest. It's still part of my evolution and my growth as a human in this body, on this lifetime, in this experience, and in this story.
I love that. And I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with because, like you said, they grow up with certain narratives. I grew up in an old school Italian family. My dad didn't have a lot of money growing up. We always had our needs and basic wants met, but there wasn't an abundance of money. So like I had to undo a lot of that, like sacrifice, like that kind of, that lack and limitation type programming, that mindset, and step into abundance. So that was a big piece of my journey as well, is removing like the guilt associated with spending, and really, I had a lot of like blockages with regard to money and finances and all that, because I was blocking the energy literally by the limiting beliefs that I had. But once you break through that and you open yourself up to, there's plenty of everything to go around in this world, everything you can think of. And it's just a matter of becoming a vibrational match, right? And attracting it into your life.
Absolutely.
And removing the guilt and stepping into abundance. And the world wants the universe wants all of us to live in this space of abundance and enjoy, everything that this world has to offer. But in order to experience that, in order to really open up the floodgates and step into that arena, we have to do the work again, right? To do the work from the inside out. And
absolutely.
And it is amazing. Have you found that on your journey, like you've had certain breakthroughs when you finally worked through something, all of a sudden what feels like you were on a plateau for such a long time, you just launch yourself into a completely new space?
I liken it to the overnight sensation, because we tend to think of things as like fairy tales, right? That somebody who you suddenly becomes a quote unquote star in Hollywood, what you don't see are the 10 years before that, before they had their breakthrough role or their breakthrough moment. And it's the same, I find, in my personal journey work, in my own evolution as a human being. There's this click that happens, right? It's like a moment, and everything shifts.
Yeah.
But it was the 10 years or a year or the 6 months or the 3 months, or maybe it's only 2 weeks, but whatever it is of that work, that play before that led to that moment. And that magic moment is so special. And so yet you can't really define it, right? It's not like you can just say, okay, well, I'm going to do that the next time, right? My next limiting belief, I'm going to overcome it like that, right? It takes all of that balance of effort and ease, right? There's all that effort that you put into working through the issues, working through the story, working through the stuff. And then there's the ease part of letting go.
Right.
And that's generally for me what I have found, because I am an overachiever, have been forever. And again, that's about that worth piece, right? That's about me saying, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to muscle through it. And sort of the divine masculine aspect of it. But the divine feminine aspect for me is allowing the flow, allowing the creativity of letting go, of being in collaboration. And when I do that, when I'm able to let go, that's typically for me when things really shift.
Yeah, that's super powerful. So what would you say, what are some words of encouragement for people who feel like they're in the middle of, I call it the suck. Like I've been there before, right? Like you've got this like amazing, you get this amazing idea, and you've got this like fresh out of the oven energy, you're all raring to go. You start like rallying the troops, like, making stuff actually happen. And then a little while into it, I'm like, what the fuck did I just get myself into? Excuse my language. I've been there many times before. And so like, what do you say to those people who are in the middle of that, right? Who are in the middle, like growing impatient, starting to doubt, like doubt's really starting to infuse their energy field. Is this ever going to happen? Is this worth it? What do you say to those people who are
when you're in the messy middle, you have to remind yourself of the why. Connect back to why you wanted to do this in the first place, how you wanted to serve. Because when you remember that, and you remember who you're doing this for, and who you can help, who you can shift, how you can change part of the planet, all of that gunk, that ish, it dissipates a bit. Now that's not to say that it's all going to go away, because you still got to go through the process, and sometimes that process creates, again, that magic, that fairy dust, that whatever that is, and it transforms into something that you didn't even know was possible. That's what I really love, is when I get in the middle of the suck, as you call it. I'm in the suck, and I remember the why. I step in, and then I say, okay, here I am. I'm going to let this take the form. Again, a little bit of that letting go. I'm going to let this take the form it's meant to take, rather than the one I think it should take. Because oftentimes when we're in the suck, we're in our ego trying to make something be the way we want it to be versus the way the universal conscious energy wants it to flow.
Right, exactly. And I like in kind of what you just described too. I use the terms, like with my clients, zooming in and zooming out. And this is something
totally
in my own life. But we have to be in that. Like, we have to be in the trenches, in the weeds, like up close, just making stuff happen in that execution phase in order to get our ideas out into the world, right? So like, that's necessary. It's necessary to grind it out, but we have to intentionally zoom out every once in a while. And that's where your deep-seated why is. We refocus and we pull ourselves away, in much in the same way that an artist painting a mural does, right? They're not up close painting the details the whole time. What do? Like, they dive in, they work on one part of the painting, and then they get perspective. They step back and they look at it from a different perspective and decide where to go next.
I've really learned that process through the making of a documentary. So I have 2 documentaries that are in production, but one of them is about fibromyalgia. It's a chronic pain syndrome. And documentaries in the independent documentary world can take 5 to 10 years to make. Okay. And I'm on year 6 of a documentary that I'm working on. And talk about the suck, right? We go through these phases where, at first, like you said, I was so excited to start this documentary, and we were filming and it was fantastic. And the reason it takes so long is you run out of money. And so you raise a little bit more money, and it's a big process. Mm-hmm. But about year 4, I was in it. I was in that space of, this is never, the always should nevers, I call them. This is never going to happen. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't have done this. I was in that space. And then I had to, as you said, back up the lens, because I couldn't even see what we call the forest for the trees. I was so in it, I couldn't see the big picture. Mm-hmm. And I had to back up the lens, the camera lens, literally, back it up, really, and look back, and figuratively, back it up to say, here's why I'm doing this. Remember that I'm serving the fibromyalgia community. Remember that I want to bring this message to these people. Remember this, and then allow it to take the new shape and form. And now here we are, year 6, and we're about to finish the film, and it'll be out in the next year. So it's a process of letting go. And I think that's part of going back to your original question about authenticity. It's a process of letting go. Process of backing up that lens, seeing the big picture, seeing who you actually are from a wider lens, and letting go of the things that aren't.
Right. I love that. So zooming out, this whole idea of that can be, I think, a little bit nebulous for people who want to know, they have more concrete way of thinking. What does that look like? How do I do that? Mm-hmm. So what are some daily practices that people can do to incorporate this whole idea of zooming out and gaining perspective in their lives in a practical way?
Yeah. So when you're in your drama, whatever the drama may be, let's say your spouse, you're having a fight with your spouse. Mm-hmm. And this is something that my partner and I very early on made the decision that our relationship was more important than being right. Let's say you're in the drama, because we have drama, right? We have fights. It's natural. It's normal. Can you, again, take that breath, because the power of the breath is beyond. Take a deep breath, and then look at, what is the importance of this fight in this moment? Mm-hmm. Backing of the lens means looking at it from a broader perspective. Meaning, is it really worth fighting over the towel that was thrown on the floor? Is that really that important? Or can I just pick it up and put it on the hook?
Mm-hmm.
Because what is important really here in the situation? Is it the towel, or is it the love and the relationship that we have? And so by backing up that lens, you look at the bigger picture, and that little minor drama just becomes far less important.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that whole process, as you were talking, you know, that really is to a process of, like you said, letting go of who's right. It's a step from the ego. You know, you're taking a step out of the ego into the soul, right? And it helps us to make that shift and to step away from blame and pointing the finger and trying to decide who's right. To, you know, this is happening for a reason, right? If it's something that's triggering me, it's happening for the purpose of my soul's evolution. And we can examine this together and work through it and figure out, what am I supposed to learn from this, and maintain that growth-based perspective.
And sometimes it's compassion for the other. Sometimes it's standing up for the self and saying, hey, it's really important to me that you pick up the towel and put it on the hook, right? There's different learnings, and for you and for whomever it is that you're in relationship with. And so when we can agree that that's our purpose, that's when things shift to a partnership of sorts, a spiritual partnership, because we are in collaboration again with all beings. It would be so much easier if we could just go and do our thing only by ourselves, right? But that's not, but we wouldn't learn.
Right.
We wouldn't actually grow. We wouldn't actually shift. We wouldn't change. We would be in our way. Imagine how boring the world would be if we all only knew our own way.
Right.
And we wouldn't evolve as a soul.
Right. Yeah. And that's really why we're here. I mean, we're here to love. I always say, you know, we allow life to become so complicated, because it can be, right, if we allow it to overtake us. But, you know, we're really here, if we simplify it and bring it down to some basic principles, you know, we're here to love, to serve, to grow, and to have fun along the way. I mean, that's really it, right? So if we can filter, run everything that we do through those filters and look at it from that perspective, then life becomes a lot simpler. Not easy, obviously, but simpler. And if we look at human relationships as opportunities to help us grow and evolve, I mean, that's really why we have human relationships, and really in close relationships, romantic relationships really do intensify the emotions and really give us the chance to take an up close and personal look at some of the work that we need to do. But again, that's their catalyst, right? Those relationships, every single interaction that we have with another person and in life is a catalyst that helps us and gives us.
What's that saying? What's it saying about you want to know how enlightened you are? Go spend some time with your family, right?
I've not heard that, but I really like it.
Yeah. Because it's just so true.
That is really funny. Yeah, I do. I think about too all the things that I get triggered by, and you know, and a lot of times too, just with I have 4 kids, and you know, they're 10 to 17, and you know, there can be some interesting dynamics sometimes when like everyone's home or like we're all in the same car, and plenty of opportunities again to look at, why am I reacting the way that I'm reacting, and how can I see it from another perspective. So yeah, very interesting. That's cute. I like that. Love that we're ending on a little bit of humor here. So we're just getting ready to wrap up. But before I do that, I wanted to give you carte blanche here for a minute or two to really open up the floor and have you talk about anything in general that you think would help our audience grow and transform. And also give your contact information in case people would like to touch base with you directly.
Oh, absolutely. So I think my final parting words really are about coming back to where we started, which is a practice. That this day-to-day interaction is the real practice.
Yeah.
And loving the self, and with tying back into that self-worth, is a practice. and to have grace with yourself as you're stepping out, as you're walking in the world, as you meet the car horn, as you meet the trash on the street. Have compassion for yourself and others, of course, but it begins with you, and the practice begins with you. So go do it. Go do it. That's really all I could say. Go do your practice. That's what I always say to my students. Go do your practice. And you can find me on all places at the Nick Demas, THE, the Nick Demas, and thenickdemas.com.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being on my show today. I have so enjoyed our time together.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you to our viewers and listeners. As you well know by now, I believe that time is a choice, and I'm grateful that you've carved time out of your day to be here and listen to everything that Nick has had to share with us today. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Bye.